Hey everyone, welcome to Smoke and Mirrors on AI in Games, the show where I talk about the games I'm playing when I'm not making YouTube videos, and then make YouTube videos about them. This month's episode was to tie into the 5-year anniversary of the show, and so I decided to return to the franchise that started it all. First Encounter Assault Recon, or F.E.A.R. Specifically, I jumped into the campaign of the third and final entry of the series, F.E.A.R. or F.E.A.R 3, whatever you want to call it, that I'd never got around to playing. Seriously, people, stop putting this thing where you put the number in the name. It doesn't work. Force stick? I mean, Jesus. F.E.A.R. was a pivotal moment for AI within the games industry, and the rise of both the goal-oriented action planning technology, as well as the adoption of planning within games. But despite that, F.E.A.R. as a franchise is a strange one. While the first entry in the franchise is held high as a shining example of AI in games, as well as a pretty decent game in its own right, the remainder of the series has been met with mixed reaction, to a point that while I completed the second entry of the series, F.E.A.R 2 Project Origin, I never got around to the third one. So I spent my downtime in March revisiting the franchise, and what I found was weird and frustrating and... Okay, let's just break this down a bit. Spoilers on, kids. Returning to the franchise requires some intense Wikipedia scrolling, given it's been several years since I played through the whole campaign of the preceding games. In fact, the last time I played through the entirety of both F.E.A.R and F.E.A.R 2 was, back before AI in games was even a thing. F.E.A.R 3 is more or less a direct sequel to F.E.A.R 2, but it also relies on you having finished the first game and remembering the larger plot revelations about the relationship between Point Man, the protagonist of F.E.A.R 1 and 3, Paxton Fettel, the antagonist of the first game who is A, Point Man's younger brother, and B, dead, and of course Alma, the creepy girl you see on all the box art. The big twist of the first game is that Alma isn't a wee girl. She's an adult woman, and is not only a powerful psychic weapon that has now lashed out at those who have tortured her over the years, but is also the mother of both Point Man and Fettel, and is the daughter of Harlan Wade, who was the evil big bad scientist of the first game, which you need to remember, otherwise half the plot of F.E.A.R 3 doesn't make sense. Also, Alma's pregnant with another child. How did she find herself bearing child once more, considering the horrific circumstances of the first game? Well, that's because... hang on, I made a note of this somewhere. Oh yeah, because in F.E.A.R 2, Alma sexually assaults Michael Beckett, who's you, by the way. You, the player, are Michael Beckett, while she conducts a psychic attack on him in the closing set piece of the game. Ugh. So yeah, F.E.A.R 3 picks up 9 months later, because now Alma is not only still not dead, but is also about to give birth. She's going into labour, and her contractions are such that her psychic energy is spewing out into our world and threatening to destroy everything. This results in all sorts of big destruction set pieces that happen, and as I discovered, can frequently kill you if you're not a good boy and stand to look at the shiny destruction. Meanwhile, the evil corporation Armacam have somehow managed to keep control of Fairpoint City, where everyone has either gone crazy from Alma's psychic hold over the city, or they've been executed to cover it all up. It's a bit of a stretch, this whole thing. I mean, how on earth is this all still kinda sorta being covered up? I mean, it shouldn't take that long. Take a page out of the Umbrella Corporation's approach to Raccoon City, guys. I mean, they did not f*** about when that kicked off. Anyway, yeah, Armacam's ineptitude essentially means you now have people to shoot at. You can kill these wonderful people either as Point Man or as Paxton Fettel, who is still dead, but is also now a ghost with psychic powers. Just roll with it. Alma's character arc, for lack of a better definition, is just weird, and as confusing as it is reductive. I find it kinda creepy that the character has went from scary wee girl to pissed off mother in the space of 3 games. I mean, sure, the big fake out of the whole franchise is that the girl is just Alma's projection, and that she's actually an adult who's about to have her third child, no less. I found it rather reductive for the character, given that as soon as you realise she isn't a young girl, her whole arc, and in turn the use of her destructive psychic powers, is governed by her desire to carry child, by having sex with a player no less, and later giving birth. I mean, I doubt if the character was actually an adult male, our first instinct would be, now have him sire offspring. It was in the process of refreshing my understanding of this plotline and getting annoyed at it, that it made me realise why I didn't bother playing the third entry at launch. I'd totally lost any interest in the story, and had clearly gone out of my way to forget all about it. However, plot elements aside, what I found strange about F.E.A.R 3 was how so much of the game's design is consistent with the first two without any real innovation. F.E.A.R had a pretty consistent gameplay loop throughout each level. walk through numerous quiet and derelict areas, get spooked by a jump scare or two, see a creepy girl once every 20 minutes, and break up the scary bits with big action set pieces against groups of enemy soldiers. Sure, it changes up from enemy soldiers to stealthy enemy soldiers, and enemy soldiers and robots, and then scary psychic monster things towards the end of the game, but the core loop holds ground. The thing is that after 3 games, that core loop is pretty predictable. To a point, you can kinda see it playing out every time you play a level. Quiet bit, gunfight! Quiet bit, Alma! Quiet bit, demon dogs! You know. It has seen some expansion, with mini-boss battles against some of the more powerful soldiers, but also a chance to run around in giant mech suits to blow up large numbers of enemy soldiers en masse. But the series has largely maintained the core loop it's had for a long time. The problem is that the quiet, scary bits suffer from diminishing returns with each entry, given they don't present any threat to the player. So you just kind of rush through them after a while and stop worrying about them all that much, given you realise they're just there to break up the fighting, and the whole "look, it's a creepy woman" shtick has worn a bit thin. Speaking of the fighting, I'll get to the AI in a second, but the thing that stood out was that F.E.A.R 3 has a cover system. You can hug specific geometry, pop out to take a shot, or swap between them during heated exchanges. Thing is, I actually found that really difficult to use when playing on a mouse and keyboard. I was playing this on PC, and more than happy to play with keyboard and mouse, but it just didn't click for me at all. So halfway through my playthrough, I swapped to playing on a gamepad, and found it easier to play given the use of the cover mechanics seemed a lot more streamlined in that control setup. I'll concede that for over half my time playing with keyboard and mouse, which was around the first 4 or 5 missions, I didn't even bother with the cover mechanics, given it just did not work for me at all. It's funny given that the slow-mo and cover combo should work really well, allowing you to pop out in slow-mo, make the shot, take out specific targets and keep moving, but I just found that it didn't click the way I wanted. I actually wondered what the game would have felt like if it automatically slowed down when you leap out of cover and make that process feel more concise. I don't know, maybe I'm overthinking it, but it didn't mesh for me the way I wanted. Although to be fair, the one thing that was also kinda weird, to the point of inconsistent with the tone of the series, was that in this game your character levels up, which improves your slow-mo, health and health regen over time. But you do that by earning XP, for lack of a better definition, and this is achieved by killing enemies but also doing very specific things, like killing 10 bad guys without taking damage, using specific weapons, using the slow-mo, using melee, and so on. Thing is, it then pops up in the corner like, hey, you did a thing, here's some XP, but it also pops up a picture of Alma as well, like she's a mascot. I found this very confusing, and it doesn't mesh at all with the tone that the game is trying to set in the story. Much of this is actually tied into the fact that you can play the game cooperatively, with players taking control of Point Man and F.E.A.R, which seems like a complete afterthought when you play it on your end, until you figure out that the ending of the game is actually driven by which of the 2 players scored highest, and as a result were deemed Alma's favourite son. It doesn't really fit with everything else that's going on. I subsequently played some of the campaign again with F.E.A.R the second time around, where you can use psychic abilities to attack enemies instead of bullets, although if you want to do that you can possess a soldier instead. It's a fun alternative and could make for an interesting co-op session if I ever came back to this game. But hey, we're here to talk about the AI of F.E.A.R 3, aren't we? That's what the franchise is known for after all. I have some reservations about this. Not just in terms of the overall AI design, but whether it has any lineage with the first 2 games. Now the thing that I forgot to mention is that F.E.A.R 3 is not made by the same team as the first 2 entries. Monolith passed the franchise over to Day One Studios, who no longer use the existing Lithtech engine, and instead opted to use their own in-house engine called the F.E.A.R that was built for their previous game Fracture. Now this can explain some of the design elements, as well as how the game handles differently from the first 2. Now in theory, this separate engine could be adopting the same AI toolchain, or at least an adaptation of what we've seen in the F.E.A.R SDK to be used in F.E.A.R 3. I have heard rumours before that the game wasn't reliant on the same AI toolchain as the previous games, and I'm somewhat inclined to agree. The AI of F.E.A.R 3 sadly doesn't stack up when compared to the first 2. It feels a lot more static in its design. A lot of the base features from past F.E.A.R games are there. Enemies that go to cover, throw grenades and shout things at each other, but the big difference is that the enemies frequently run at you, maybe run to cover, or just hide in cover and pop out. Sure, they'll sometimes run around and move in front of you, but you can easily be waiting to pick off an enemy from cover for a while. Plus, they don't appear to conduct coordinated attacks, although the voice commands are still in there to give the impression they are. It removes any of the urgency from the earlier games that kept you on your toes, meaning you can often just hang back and pick them off. Plus, it seems like navigating outside of their prescribed combat area is cheating, because I can stand outside the room and attack the enemies from a safe location, and they don't follow me at times. There are some boss battles, but I found that you can actually game the AI pretty easily if you're smart about it. I discovered halfway through my playthrough as Point Man just how game-breaking the riot shield is, given you can just run up and smack them like so, and beat not just regular AI but boss characters into submission. My biggest frustration is that the game is prone to having monster closet sequences, where either Armacum soldiers, crazed citizens or demon dog things will repeatedly spawn until you trigger something in the world that makes it stop. I really dislike that sort of level design. Reminds me of those annoying moments in Treyarch's Call of Duty campaigns, and it doesn't help that it goes against how F.E.A.R typically builds its combat sequences. So more than once I was fighting off enemies for several minutes at a time, until I figured out there was a trigger somewhere in the world I needed to activate. Alrighty, so let's wrap this up. Despite going into this with an open mind, I'd say that F.E.A.R 3 just felt a little uninspired and that the franchise has largely run its course. The game's ending implies the story isn't over, and in some respects it feels like an attempt to steer the franchise away from its current trappings, but then it never really resurfaced after this entry, and I think kind of with good reason. But hey, while I might have found it frustrating, I'm sure there's some folk out there who enjoyed it. So what do you all think? Let's hear from you all down in the comments. I'd be keen to hear what anyone else who played the game made of it. And with that, this wraps up Smoke and Mirrors for another month. Thanks for watching, and I'll be back as always with another game next month. I'm going to come back to February's case study and talk all about my time playing through Horizon Zero Dawn and finishing off the main campaign and DLC. I'll see you then.